like to call this work session of the Anchorage Assembly to order and begin with kind of a brief statement to the public. A work session is basically a typical informal opportunity for the Assembly to get together and to get more information. We post our work sessions. Typically, they're in smaller rooms than this, and we cannot take official action at a work session, and we're not taking testimony from the public. This is basically for our purposes so that we can get information. I also have received a slew of emails, and I wanted to make a few other clarifying comments. Municipal elections by municipal law are solely under the control of the municipal assembly. The election is run with a budget that is in the assembly department. The election is run by assembly department employees, and a municipal election is certified or finalized only by vote of this body. So regardless whether or not there is an independent investigator, and I believe that still may occur, it's essential for the assembly to understand what's happening and to be able to recognize and make an informed decision as we go forth with action. The agenda today is before all of you. Additional copies of the agenda are available in the back of the room if you'd like to see them. We have 2 hours today where we will have a preliminary weigh-in and status check with members of the Election Commission, who are right over there to my left. I'm sorry we only got 2 of them, but we have the chair and vice chair with us. And then a second item on the agenda will be a response from the clerk's office in regard to specific questions that were presented several days ago to the clerk's office. Copies of those questions have been shared with the Assembly and are in front of you today. And then the third item on the agenda is a walkthrough of data and legal information that we've asked Mr. Wheeler, the municipal attorney, to provide for our behalf. Basically, what I hope we learn today is that from the Election Commission, by code, they're to advise us on the conduct of elections. And so my primary concern here today, I think our primary concern, is to know if their needs are being met, to ask them what they need from us, and to sort of do a check-in with them. And from the clerk, my hope is that the questions provided the clerk, and the questions I know you all will ask, will be able to give us a better idea of the election support process that took place in this last election. Then from the municipal attorney, we'll be able to gather from the materials that he has gathered. We're going to have hopefully we'll have our foundational tools in place, our protocols, and the legal parameters we need to make important decisions about this election. So I'm hoping that we can have at least 45 minutes at the end for that, and that we can center our questions just on the topic that is right before us at the moment and put the rest of the questions in the parking lot so we can get those answered too, but we might not have time today to do it. This particular work session is one step in the recovery process. I don't believe it'll be the last step. I think that I know that outside of the information available this afternoon, we will be able to get additional information later. So I'm asking you, if you could, to indulge me and let the Election Commission go fairly quickly here. If you must make an introductory comment, I would really request you hold it to a minimum because we've got a full agenda. So, Ms. Gray-Jackson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak really quickly. And I know it's not a public testimony, but I had a conversation with a constituent who has a petition with 400 signatures, and I said that I would make sure that he can present it before we got started, and I'm asking that you allow that to happen right now. Mr. Gasway is right here, and I would like for him to present that petition before we get started. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, stop a minute, please. We have an agenda agenda that was prepared in advance. We have a whole lot to cover in this agenda. I'll be happy to receive that petition, but we do not have time on the agenda to add discussion of the petition at this time.
Madam Chair, I'm not asking for discussion. The only thing I'm asking is that he be able to present the petition before we get started. No discussion.
I'll certainly be happy to receive it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So with that, if we could immediately go to the members of the Election Commission, I wonder if you could start by introducing yourself and telling us what you've been doing and just general comments. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Gwen Matthew, and I'm the chairman of the Election Commission. We have been busy at work. We've been putting in long hours going through this extraordinary amount of question, absentee, and mail-in ballots. We have multiple times what we normally process. We have handled more than 15,000 envelopes. We do not see the ballots directly because we keep the information private. We have not got to the point of actually running those ballots through yet. Each and every one, we check for the validity of their vote, whether they're qualified to vote. We have a quite detailed process of examining everything. We have lots of tools at our disposal, but I think the biggest thing is that needs to be known is we check every single one of those 15,000. So we appreciate your, I think, forbearance that we may not make it on time this time.
Go ahead, Mr. Starr, with a question.
Oh, she's done it.
Do you want to make other comments before
Nope,
we ask
I'm fine.
questions?
I will answer questions.
When you come across a ballot that you can't verify that they're a legal voter or not, and I assume you check DMV records and last known address and a few things like that. If you see a voter that's voted on a ballot that has a registered address outside the municipality, what do you do with that?
We have at our disposal those kind of records from the state, what they call the VREM system, and we check. We have district codes that are noted on the bottom of where they prior lived, plus if they're registered outside of the city, outside of the municipality, we immediately put it in a pending file and we verify. That is a reject code if they live outside the municipality.
And after that, what happens to that attempt to vote?
We review all of those. As a commission, we make a uniform decision. It's not just one person that looks at that envelope. We verify it several times. We confer with each other. So we make sure that it's in the right spot.
At the end of the election and after the election is certified, what happens to those?
They are sent letters by the clerk department of the rejection and the reason why, and they are given an opportunity to respond.
So far, and I recognize you guys aren't done yet with that process, do you have a lot of them in your interpretation or your experience?
All of these numbers I give are preliminary numbers today. It's very important to realize that we have not made the final
And I'm not
numbers.
asking, I really
Okay.
focused only on the amount of ballots that have been rejected.
We have a lot more rejected than last year, but then again, we have multiple times the amount that we rejected last year. We are actually even instigating a new thing that can give us how many of each rejection codes that were issued.
How many do you have so far that have been rejected? Can you tell me that? I understand you're not...
We have over 500.
Thank you.
Additional questions for the commission? Mr. Trombley?
There was a report that was done on Channel 2 about an individual who had their vote rejected, but what had happened is that they were a registered voter in the state of, in the municipality, and I don't know, they lived in a separate part of town. They moved to a new part of town, and they registered to vote in their new section, and from my understanding, the vote was rejected because they had changed their registration 30 days, not before the 30-day cutoff, but she was actually a registered voter, and she should have just been able to, she voted a question ballot, but that was, from my understanding, that was thrown out. Have you been running in, do you know what I'm talking about, and have you been running into a lot of those situations?
We haven't been running into a lot of those situations. That certainly can happen, which is probably the purpose of the canvass, where any person can come and ask that their vote be counted or not. We do give them every opportunity. That's why we send out the letters. They can come back, and we can certainly correct if it is not accurate. I have found that there needs to be an education of the public as well, that just because you move from, say, Kotzebue to the municipality, you need to register. It does not automatically happen. Your vote transfer does not automatically happen. You have to go in and register for that.
Okay, thank you. One other question is, for the, well, no, this would be a question for the clerk's office. That's all, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, I wonder if you could give me a little bit more clarity in the ballots that you're counting that were not official ballots. I've understood two things there, the sample ballots as well as the ones that were photocopied that were used. You're actually taking those and transferring those onto an official ballot, and then the official ballot goes through the machine, or do you just physically count those ballots? I'm not quite clear on how that process works.
Only an official ballot will run through the AccuVote machine. So if a ballot was voted on, say, the sample ballot or other type of thing, or some Xeroxed, whatever, those votes need to be transferred to a valid card that runs through the machine. Is that answering your question?
Yes, it does. And I just want to be one to tell you how much we appreciate the effort. We understand it's quite complicated to what it has been in the past, particularly with having to deal with that, but the patience and the attention that you're paying to this, I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yes, I'd like to do two follow-up questions for the last two. First, the one that Mr. Trombley asked about, where a person re-registered basically their change of address, but they were they were registered in the municipality beforehand. Is that questionable, even though, I mean, they didn't make the 30-day cutoff, but they re-registered?
We have caught a couple of those slipped through when we first started. We were a little bit overwhelmed. But it will be caught. They're not going to count their vote. There are 5 different areas where it shows in VREMS about registration and the different dates. But we also have to go down in that shows their prior district where they were registered before. And we have several helps. This is one of our helps where we can go down the district. If the VREMS shows that they were registered in a different district, we can go and check and see if that is a municipality district, because that's not obvious on the VREMS. So we have that, and some people have voted they've been registered in other areas, other parts of the state. Yeah.
But so with that individual, her vote would be counted for the municipal-wide votes, but not for her service district?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then as you transfer these questionable ballots onto a ballot that will go through the machine, what do you do with the ballots, the sample ballots and the photocopy ballots? Where are they stored, or how do you keep them after you've done this?
We keep all of those ballots separate, or the sample ballots or whatever they are, we keep all of those, and we keep them, I believe it's for 30 days after the election is certified.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I'm sorry. Ms. Drummond, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not sure how we're supposed to get your attention way down here.
Yeah, go. Wave your arm.
I have a significant number of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Matthew, and thank you to your colleagues for the hard work that you've been doing. I cannot imagine having to transfer by hand all of those marks and get them right. I'm a little concerned about how do you validate that all of those marks were transferred correctly from each one?
I think Jacqueline, maybe with the municipal clerk, could answer that question better than I on that one.
Put a star by that one so we can ask it again, Ms. Drummond.
Okay. Ms. Matthew, have you heard, I am sure you've heard that 53 out of the 121 precincts ran out of ballots at some point during the election afternoon and evening?
Yes.
Okay. How did the ballot shortages affect your review of the election to this point?
It has made us tremendously more careful about our processes. I don't know how else to answer that part. We have them coming in various ways that we have to determine each one.
Have you thought at all about how many voters appeared at the polls but were unable to vote because of the lack of ballots? Did that figure into your process at this point?
It's interesting that you'd say that. We have been, I don't know what the right word is, we have been amazed and admire the voters of Anchorage for how much tenacity they had and how much most of them had patience to sit and fill out an entire question ballot, all of this information. They had time to fill it out and still submit it. We have hundreds in certain precincts that have done that. I cannot address, because I was personally not there, those that were not able to vote. I know that occurred. I don't know how many. But we as a commission are amazed at the turnout, which is honestly a very good thing that they turned out and voted, and at how many people went to extra effort and succeeded in submitting their vote.
Did you attempt to determine how many voters appeared at any polling places but were unable to vote? Was that part of your process?
That's not part of my process.
Okay.
At least not yet.
So in that case, you would not have taken statements from any would-be voters?
No, right now we're simply in the process of processing those 15,000-plus vote envelopes.
Is any part of your process related to questioning elections workers?
Yes, we have. If we have questions and it's unclear in the verification of votes, we have called up election workers and asked for their, how they process this, to ask for clarification on notes written on the register or on the envelope, yes.
Okay. But you haven't done any extensive interviewing. It's simply, at this point, questions regarding individual ballots and how they were filled out, or how the question ballot forms were filled out, and how the ballots themselves were processed.
That is our process, and we're in the midst of it.
Okay. And let's see, your number, preliminarily, the clerk told us some days ago that there were approximately 120 question ballots submitted by people living or registered outside of Anchorage, and that number is now over 500, now that you've had time to think about it. Or to,
No, that is
to process
incorrect. We have had a certain amount that are registered elsewhere. There are many codes that we can give them. They registered late, registered elsewhere, not registered. And that is not the total number is over 500, but not just those that registered elsewhere.
Okay. Okay. And do you get complaints directly from voters who did not receive an absentee ballot?
We have not. We have had pretty overwhelmingly positive. We appreciate. Yeah, we have not had much negative comment.
Okay, that's it for now.
Ms. Trainee?
Thank you. We had 10,750 sample ballots produced. How many of those sample ballots have gone through the system yet? Do you know?
We, as a commission, have not opened any of the absentee ballots or any of the question ballots, so we have not seen that yet.
Now, do the sample ballots meet the requirements of 28.40.010, Section E? Has the requirements that each ballot shall bear the words "official ballot" the day of the election and the fax-filed signature of the municipal clerk. Does the sample ballots meet that requirement?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Any question that you can't answer, you just say so, and that's fine. And any question that you want further help with, just say that, and that's fine, too. We're just trying...
As far as the sample ballots, they are, the ones that are handed out at each precinct are identical to the real ballot, and how they, most of them, in the midst of what we see processed, we have all the information of the person and their signature, we have the signature of the precinct worker, those types of things.
On each one of these sample ballots?
There is no sample ballot that's loose. It is always with its information and stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions also, and I'm prepared. Okay, did you speak to anybody at the clerk's office regarding how many ballots were kept at the clerk's office? Do you want me to say it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Did you talk to anybody at the clerk's office and ask them how many ballots were kept at the clerk's office?
No?
Okay. Did you talk to anybody in the clerk's office and ask them how many were sent to each precinct?
As I've said before, that's not really we're just in the midst of verifying and stuff like that. We're not really we are not, at this point, looking at any of that type of thing.
Okay, so you're not looking at how many ballots were kept in clerk's office, how many were sent downtown? You're not looking into that right now?
Not right now.
Okay, so I won't ask the next question. Okay, do you know how many of the question or hand-counted ballots that you refused to count were cast after the precinct where the ballot was cast and where we ran out of ballots?
Would you mind repeating that one?
Okay, let me just read this. Okay, if you know how many of the question or hand-counted ballots that you refused to count were cast after the precinct where the ballot was cast ran out of ballots? Do you understand the question?
I don't know the answer to that.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Starr. I appreciate that, Mr. Starr. Okay, my next question was how many ballots were printed, and I think we received that information in an email that I just haven't had a chance to look at, so I'll look at it when I get home.
And we'll get that later.
Okay, great. Can we see election workers' notes from each precinct?
And we'll get that later, too. It's in the questions to the clerk.
Okay, so these questions that you sent out, Madam Chair, are questions to the clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, then I won't continue to ask them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing nobody else in queue, I've got two. I have gotten several calls from people who were worried because they saw their ballot go into the side of the AccuVote machine. They said it didn't fit in, and the worker just stuck it in the side. How do you deal with those? Are those all considered question ballots?
No, they're not. As long as they sign the register, they are a regular vote. When they put them in the side of the machine, they run them later through the AccuVote, but they're still counted as a regular vote. If it were a sample ballot, then those votes would be transcribed to a regular ballot, but they are counted as in the regular vote.
Okay. How many members are on your commission?
There are 8 of us. One is ill at the moment, and one is called for a dying brother.
And what kind of hours have you been putting in?
We have been working 12-hour days.
For how many days? Do you remember?
2 days on the 12 hours, and before that, full days.
Okay. I also was asked by someone, are you paid for your work? Who do you talk to on that? Who hired you? Who got you in there, this job you're in right now?
We are appointed by the mayor.
And confirmed by the assembly, correct?
Correct.
All right.
And yes, we get paid. I think it's
Okay.
not too much.
Have you witnessed any material to this election being destroyed?
No.
Okay. I think Ms. Drummond.
On one of your previous questions regarding the ballots that were put into the side of the AccuVote machine instead of fed through it, I have heard stories of significant numbers of voters whose names appeared on the registers at the precincts who were told because they weren't able to vote an official ballot that they should not sign the register and that they were to vote question ballots. Have you been able to correlate how many of those situations occurred and how many registered voters did not get to sign the register? I can only imagine the confusion that this is going to create in doing the bookkeeping of this election.
Okay, let me, just a second there. If they sign the question register, their vote is run as a question vote, which is why they fill out all that paperwork, all the signing and stuff like that. I don't think we're going to miss anybody at all. Our process is extremely thorough. So one way or the other, whether it's a question ballot or run through the regular channels on the regular register, they will count.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Birch?
I just had a question kind of on the functionality of the hardware. Is it Diebold or Diebold? Anyway, the scanning units, as I recall, they were secured by the state in about 2002, I think is when they kind of went through a statewide process through the Lieutenant Governor's office. And I know when I personally voted, I think it kicked out my ballot, you kind of put it up there, the privacy sleeve, and it bounces out a couple times, and you kind of, and I know from, having familiarity with, laptops and computers and stuff, that, things that are built in 2002 and, 10, 11 years later, sometimes in the technology world, are pretty outdated. And I was just wondering, do you have any, as a commission, do you have any engagement with respect to the hardware side of this? In other words, the functionality, if you will, of the scanning equipment?
Well, I happen to have been chairman of the AccuVote testing board before this, so I do, and those are amazing machines. They are utterly amazing. They print out everything. It is impossible for them to go haywire. You can put it in any way. You can put it in front, back. Sometimes if it doesn't read, you just turn it over and put it in. We have tested each and every one of those machines every year. And we run tapes, we double-check, and just like the commission, 2 people work on it at the same time. They're highly accurate. I mean, I think that I could almost say that they're totally accurate. I've never found a discrepancy.
Well, that's good to understand. What is the bounce back when when you feed it in and it kind of kicks back, and then and that seemed to be a recurring issue. And I don't know if there's
occasionally there are marks on the side margin. Those little dots that go on the side of the ballot is what they read, and sometimes it's bent or torn, or there's a stray mark. It'll kick it back. But it also records. It also tells you on the front of the machine what is the problem. Like perhaps it's an overvoted race. Perhaps they voted twice in the same candidacy, or undervoted, and it will tell you. It's a very smart machine.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Holman?
And thank you again for the Commission's work on the elections. Does the Commission provide oversight to the clerk's office on Election Day, or is it more the other way around?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, but from my viewpoint, they're separate. We work together, but we're not out there running around, although I visited some precincts that night myself, But, yeah.
Okay, so that was my next question. Do you provide oversight to the poll workers at the precincts at all?
We can go out and watch. I did, because I heard that there was a little bit of trouble, because my daughter was one of the precinct chairs. But
Madam Chair, or Per-Chair, my name is Jean Abel, and I'm a member of the commission, and, our job is to view and look at only the mail-ins, the absentees, and the question ballots, and other than that, we don't have any further information than that.
Okay, and so to that extent, then, your review and report, is it fair to say, is strictly limited to your role with absentee, question, and mail-in ballots?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, just a couple of quick questions, but I do want to say, I want you to appreciate the trust and confidence that I've got in this, just listening to the two of you and how calm and level you are in each and every answer that you're giving. It's pretty obvious you know your job and you're doing it well. We know that you're going to do the canvassing next Tuesday. Far out, and nothing nailing you down here, when would you anticipate you would be ready to present final report on this?
we talked about that amongst ourselves, and we're not sure with the amazing amount of volume. We want to make absolutely certain that we have a 100% accurate, to the best of our ability, report to give you. I really can't say. It won't be too long after that.
Thank you. And other than that, I would ask of you if there's anything that we can do to help you other than having the patience and giving you the time that you need to do your job right.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm satisfied with your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, Ms. Drummond?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Ms. Matthew, I understand that poll workers were using every single kind of ballot they had at their disposal, including some referred to as special needs ballots. I apologize, I have not seen the different types of ballots, but is there any different way in which you handle those if they were not submitted by a special needs voter?
Generally, they were written on to explain the difference to us. The precinct workers were amazing in their ability to adapt to the situation. They did a tremendous job. This is a special needs envelope, and there's different things that they fill out for a special needs person because you have to verify the representative as well as the voter. But usually, if they ran out of question envelopes, then they'd write on this, treat as a question envelope. So we've been able to figure them all out. If we had any questions, we ask them, or it's written on the register, or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, I thought there was one other hand. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank the Election Commission and all the election workers for what you do for the citizens in our community, and I want you to know how very much I personally appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think she spoke for all of us, and I know we'll talk again. Oh, Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, the special needs question triggered something in my mind. Have you had occasion as of yet to reject any of the special needs ballots?
I don't believe so. Well, just a second, let me confer with Jean.
Okay.
We're not sure the answer. If there is any, it's like one or two.
Okay. Even the ones that were not necessarily for special needs people that were used as backups?
Those were clearly marked.
Those were, okay, thank you. And did you say, I think you did, but I just want to make sure, confirm it, you said you have not yet counted the absentee votes that were voted prior to the election? The in-person absentees?
No, we haven't had a chance to run those yet.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Okay, with that, we're going to move to the clerk's office. Basically, what we're expecting is Ms. Grinstein is going to go through answers to some questions that were given her a few days ago. She's going to talk generally about what activities she took in preparation leading up to Election Day and how her office responded to some of the challenges on Election Day. Later on, I didn't make a ton of copies of these questions, but if people want to see them or get copies, they'll be available from me after the meeting. Ms. Grinstein, do you want to just go down the questions yourself, or in order? How do you want it? Should we go that way?
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologize that I'm losing my voice after all these weeks. I'd like to start out for the public with a letter that I gave to each of the assembly members before we started. And in it I said I'm recommending that Anchorage engage an independent investigator to review the recent April 3rd, 2012 municipal election. Hopefully a report from an independent source will serve to add clarity to the issues which arose during the election. I have every confidence in the ability of the municipal attorney and my office to conduct an impartial investigation. However, the public has been exposed to a mix of fact, rumor, and speculation regarding the election, and an independent investigation will provide analysis to the public in this body. The clerk's office would assist such an independent investigation in any way requested. Okay. Just want to take the personalities out of the equation.
Thank you, Ms. Grinstein.
The first question was how many ballots were printed. You each received a notebook with the tab 3.
We just got this. We haven't had a chance to look at them really yet.
But there are a lot of numbers and information in there. And again, how many ballots were delivered to each precinct. The numbers are also included in the workbook. How many ballots remained at City Hall after 8 p.m. on Election Day? 53,276 were at City Hall before the UAA, the airport, LUSAC, and Chugach Senior Center returned their ballots. Again, the information is on the spreadsheet. There are a total of 63,705 ballots left over from the election. How many were reserved in other locations? Were these accessible to election troubleshooters? All the extra ballots were kept at City Hall, and they were all available to troubleshooters to run to the precincts if they ran low. The LUSAC absentee ballots, LUSAC was for 2 weeks an all-ballot absentee polling station. Those ballots were locked in the clerk's office in the back room, and when the precinct ran low, they were instructed that they could get the security guard to open it and use those ballots.
Ms. Grinstein, you want to slow down a bit, so if there's people who have questions on some of your responses, we have time to chime in. Any questions on so far from anybody? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Can we see election worker notes from each precinct? Yes, election workers can fill out comment sections as well as the ballot accountability report on election night. Not each precinct chair did that, and I think...
you know what percentage of precinct chairs did that?
I don't. Do you?
I'd say probably 90%.
So we got the bulk of them?
We have all ballot accountability reports and about 90% comments.
Okay.
I have them with me.
Are they in the notebook?
No. You have
Mr. Wheeler, do you want to comment on that?
I don't have the sheets themselves, but I think on your accountability report, the notes index will give you a brief summary.
Okay, so there's a summary in here?
Yeah, it's in the tab 1 spreadsheet, which we'll cover.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Could we...
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I'm just trying to correlate, can we just number these questions on this sheet you gave us, like 1 through whatever it is? I'm just trying to keep track of things. I'm getting lost.
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You got 12 questions here. So the first question was how many ballots were printed. Did this come from the clerk's office?
This was prepared by Mr. Wheeler, the municipal attorney, in consultation with the clerk's office.
Okay, so how many ballots were printed? Does that show up in here someplace?
Yes.
143,000, so at least 70%.
And how many were delivered to each precinct on the second question?
The precinct laws are in there as well.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. We just got this, folks, so we're trying to figure it out. All right. It would help, Mr. Wheeler or Ms. Grinstein, if you can actually say the answer instead of just telling us in the book, it will help a little bit, I think. So can we go back, Mr. Birch, you said you were on question 2?
Well, I just numbered, you got a dozen questions on this piece of paper you handed us
Right.
before the meeting.
I got you.
And how many ballots were printed is 143,000. How many ballots were delivered to each precinct? I understand there's a spreadsheet in here, so
Yeah, that will be hard for her to just say,
is there a
because
total number? Is it,
there should be, Ms. Grinstein, you want to detail what's in the spreadsheet, or Mr. Wheeler, either one?
Debbie?
Mr. Wheeler would be.
Go ahead, Mr. Trainee.
Just to answer Chris, there was 143,125 official ballots. There were 10,750 sample ballots. So when you add those two together, it gives you the real number, because the sample ballots were used in some cases in this election.
okay?
Okay, wait a minute, Ms. Birch, are you,
Yeah, no, I
you want us to go back to question 2? Anything further on question 2?
that's it. Okay, so the total number of ballots that were distributed, and is that the bottom line, the 72,350?
The way we structured this, and maybe it wasn't the right way to go, was to put Mr. Wheeler at the end of the agenda, and he's going to walk us through this book. I did it that way because I thought questions might arise from the clerk's presentation that Mr. Wheeler would be able to respond to. But it's kind of integrated material, so you have to jump around.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
so, all right, we're down to 3, I think. Could you repeat the answer to 3, Ms. Grinstein? Which is, how many ballots remained in City Hall after 8 p.m. on Election Day?
53,276 were at City Hall before the absentee stations at the university, the airport, LUSAC, and GK Senior Center were returned.
Okay.
There are a total of 63,705 ballots left over from the election.
So a total of 63 left, roughly. Okay.
Okay, Madam Chair.
On that point, Ms. Drummond.
Actually, back up one.
Okay.
Madam Clerk delivered a whole bunch of numbers that were not responses to question number 2, which was how many ballots were delivered to each precinct. She also said how many ballots were at City Hall and a number of other places. She had some pretty specific numbers, which I wasn't able to keep up with. I hope we get this in writing. However, the 4 boxes of ballots that I understand were in this back room here, left over from the LUSAC Library in-person absentee voting, she didn't have a number for that. How many ballots were in those boxes before voting started on Election Day?
Okay.
How many ballots were in those boxes? Excuse me.
Grinstein?
I don't have that number.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can get it, but I just don't have it right now.
That's fine. We can get more answers later.
Just to
Mr. Hogan?
clarify, now, I'm getting the number 63,000 some total. What was the amount left at City Hall, not including the absentee location stations?
Mr. Wheeler?
Madam Chair, if you go to tab 1, the last sheet in tab 1, it's a one-page document called Unvoted Ballots. I received this from the clerk's office. It's, remembering there's 34 different kinds of ballots, but you'll see some totals there. You'll see a column for the City Hall total, the by-mail total, and then the precinct, airport UA, LUSAC total.
Thank you, that helps.
That should...
Mr. Honeman?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Just give us time to work through this. All right. Are we through with question 3? Okay, the 4th question is, well, I guess we answered that too. How many were reserved in other locations, and were those ballots accessible to the election troubleshooters? Was the next question. And you answered part of that already, I know, Ms. Grinstein.
I thought I'd answered it. All the extra ballots were kept at City Hall.
So they were transferred from the other locations to City Hall?
Right, with the exception of the LUSAC ballots, which were locked in the clerk's office back here.
And when were they transferred?
After Election Day, I don't know. Did the workers bring them in?
I believe the chairperson of the LUSAC brought them back, but they came back after the election.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Drummond.
The chairperson here at LUSAC is in the audience if we have a question for her. I don't believe she brought back the 4 cases of ballots that were in that back room, which are uncounted at this point. I have real concerns that there were somewhere in the vicinity of 10,000 ballots sitting in that back room that, yes, they were accessible by the poll workers in this building on Election Day. They were unlocked for access for other reasons and discovered. Nobody appeared to have access to them. Ballots were needed all over town, and yet there were thousands of ballots sitting here in the back room.
Ms. Grinstein, could you talk about the ballots that were stored here a minute?
I actually can't. I don't have specific knowledge. They were here because there should have been every ballot style here because this was an all absentee precinct, but I do not have a specific answer.
Okay. Ms. Drummond, is there a person in the audience that would have that specific, that you would like to call up at this time, or do you want to deal with that later?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Ms.
Duke
Grinstein.
probably has the answer.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Duke has the answer.
Oh, go ahead.
The Lusac Library is an absentee location, and yes, they have every card style. Bonnie Jack, chairperson for the library, called our office notifying us that she had a shortage. We notified her of the ballots in the room. She saw them before when she removed the ballot box from that room. We told her she could take the card style, which was 4-1 and 4-2, that she was missing. You have to understand the only cards that were in shortage in the city were 4-1 and Card 2. Card 2 is Eagle River. No one needed any of that. We had plenty of them at City Hall. So your statement doesn't necessarily apply to this.
Ms. Drummond, do you want to pursue?
I still have concerns that there were 4 boxes of ballots here when the clerk said that all the unused ballots or undistributed ballots were at City Hall, except for these, which still appear to be unaccounted for. Thank you.
Okay. We go to the next question at this point, and that was about the election worker notes, and we were told that we have 90% of them, and they're referenced in the notebook. Is that correct?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
Under tab 1, the second to last document is entitled Draft Ballot Accountability.
Yes, sir.
It's about 8 pages. The last 3 pages, you'll see a list of notes, and we'll have to try to reprint this in a way that's better tied to the precincts. We ran out of time this afternoon, but those notes are from examining the comment sheets provided by the precincts. So if you look at page 5, for example, right about in the middle, you'll see 3 in a row that say, did not run out, no comments, did not run out, no comments. When you see the no comment marker,
yes,
my understanding is the deputy clerk made that notation because the precinct did not report anything on the comment sheet.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready then to go to question 6?
On that point,
Go ahead, Mr. Starr.
what's precinct 905? And the reason I bring that up is the ad ballots show 3,250 ballots added into that precinct number. The colored spreadsheets on the front don't show me. I can't readily find where the location for 905 is. Can somebody tell me where 905 is?
That's the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Church.
There you go.
Is that a typo? I mean,
Sorry, referring to what?
We'll just verify the data later because
That's a typo.
yeah, it's got to be. You only have 2,400 voters there. You didn't send them 3,200 ballots. So if you don't mind making a note that would be corrected there, Dennis. Thank you.
All right. Can we move to training? Next question was, who conducted the training and supervision of training for the election workers? How long was the training? What percentage of workers attended?
The deputy clerk performed all 4 training sessions, which are 2+ hours long. 688 people have been paid by ESS, which means there have been workers as working the election. 545 reported attending training.
Is there a requirement to attend the training before you actually become an election worker?
There is. Yes, but do understand that not all election workers are required to attend that training because it does not apply to their job duty.
Who is required to attend the training?
Chair people and election workers. but absentee locations do not attend election worker training. They do on-the-job training at other absentee locations.
Did all the required people attend the training?
No.
What do you do if somebody doesn't attend the training and...
There are many reasons why a person wouldn't attend training. Sometimes they're out of town.
No, I understand there are many reasons, but if somebody is required to attend the training and they do not attend, what do you do?
If they have never worked an election before, they cannot work. If they have, which many people have, many, many years of experience, they're allowed to forego, and we hand them an election manual.
Do you have instances where you told people they could not do the work because they did not attend the training?
Not that I remember this year.
But you specifically checked that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
Was the training any longer or shorter than previous years?
Yeah.
Since I started doing training, it's always been 2.5 hours.
Ms. Gruenstein, you have a little longer tenure in the clerk's office. Do you know if it has a change from previous practice?
I don't remember. I think it's varied year by year, and some sessions go more quickly than others.
Okay. And about how many, do you have a higher or lower percentage of returning poll workers this year, as opposed to people who've done it before than usual?
I asked the person who did all the staffing, and she said she thinks there's about 75% of the people came back this year. And I don't know if usually there's probably about the same ratio. I know we lost some because of the change in payroll people, but we always lose some people and get new ones.
Sure. Thank you.
I have just one additional training question. The troubleshooters, I've had calls with people who said that the troubleshooters could not respond in a timely fashion or could not address the problem that they were given. Do they get extra training? And what kind of training do you provide for troubleshooters?
Troubleshooters have a separate manual. Troubleshooters attend election training. There is no additional training for troubleshooters. Most of them are returning workers. They have to have worked an election before. Most of them come back year after year after year because it is highly specialized, and most of them are field workers for the state, which is what they call their troubleshooters.
So you don't differentiate the training?
No.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
The company that was contracted out to the municipality, ESS, do they have any role in training, or are they simply, what exactly is their role?
Their role is they're technically the employer, and they do the payroll. They receive the timesheets and do the payroll.
And that's it? Nothing more?
Nothing more. We did the hiring.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question is, what is the policy when polling station ballots run out? What were election workers told to do if this occurred? What is your office policy for dealing with election emergencies, and what was the chain of command to respond to emergencies?
The policy, which was announced at training and reiterated when they picked up their supplies to the chairman and the troubleshooters, was to keep a close eye on the ballot levels, and that we had lots of ballots at City Hall and to call if they were getting low. We have a special election hotline, 243-VOTE, that we set up for emergencies, and it rings into everybody's telephone in the clerk's office. If the employee's away from the phone, from their desk phone, they can forward it to their cell phone. All clerk office employees were there about 6:30 in the morning before the polls opened, and we're responsible for answering questions, and everybody's well-versed on election issues. And if a person had a question they couldn't answer, they were to refer to the deputy clerk or myself.
Okay, there's a number of questions on that one. Mr. Trombley, you're first.
I read through the general election booklet that you give out to poll workers, and there's nothing in there. It gives 100 scenarios in case there's a blackout, a power outage, what to do if the ballots are not going through the machine. But there's nothing in there that talks about there's nothing in that manual for the poll workers to say if there is a shortage of ballots, this is what you do. Is that an oversight? Is that just something that's never been assumed? I mean, last time this happened was 1989. Is that something that you're looking into as far as
It will be added
procedure?
next year.
Well said.
Mr. Trainee.
On Tuesday night, Pam Teshy was here she was a poll worker with the Lutheran Church. She said they received less ballots than did last year. Was that just her impression, or did we send out less ballots to some of the precincts than we sent to them last year?
I don't know how many we sent to that precinct last year. I don't know if it's on any of the sheets or not.
If you give us a minute, we can look that up. We have both this year's order and last year's order.
If you would, please, because we hear that from some precinct workers, that they had less ballots for this election. I'd like to know why.
Well, we did check in that precinct at the meeting, after Pam had left, and that precinct received 275 ballots. They requested 50 more, and then they returned 35.
So they returned some to you?
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
Well, I was trying to let it go here a little bit farther into that, but it seems to be drifting back to the amount of ballots set to the polling stations. And I guess, can you expound on your criteria a little bit that you put forth on how that decision was made? We have a good graph on the front page. We show, registered voters, the 70% rule. We also see election history, and I'm doing some of this for you. What we see is we see the amount of voter turnout in 11 and 9 and all the other things. Can you give me your criteria, Barbara, on what the decision was made to send 600, 750? We have a nice list on how many you did send. What did you do there?
It's based on historical numbers, how many people show up. An extreme example is on base. I believe there's about 4,000 registered voters on base, and they got 225 ballots, but I think it was under 100 people voted.
Is there a formula, though, or do you just say about that works for today?
It's more approximated. And in some precincts, there are more than one ballot style that they receive. So we have to adjust for that as well.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your dialogue with Ms. Duke and yourself. Did you ever talk about that criteria? And I put you on the spot particularly because you were here when we had the substance of Prop 5, that one summer where we spent our summer vacation here listening to time and time again. Did you not get in your mind that there would be a hot button issue that could potentially drive up the need for more ballots? Did you ever talk that way?
We knew that it was going to be a high turnout. I personally did not get into the granularity of how many ballots were going into each.
Was that because you? I mean, I'm not going to put you between Ms. Duke's discussion point, but is it? I mean, I guess I don't understand why you wouldn't have had that conversation. So, did you just leave the decision to Ms. Duke in that category?
Yes, I had a high-level discussion, but I did not go down and do the math myself.
Was your formula or your gut feel or your decision to distribute, did you increase that over what you would have done in other elections? I mean, did you weigh the factor of the hot button issue?
I knew it was going to be high, but I did not get into the level of detail that at this point I wish I had.
Well, I understand that, the hindsight question. I'm just trying to come up with the tone of the sort of the chain of command here where in fact you would have had the empowerment to get into that decision and correct it if it wasn't particularly right. How many elections have you had through your office as clerk?
9.
Thank you. That's all I have on that one. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
Back to the calling into Election Central, do you know if any time precincts were unable to reach anybody in the clerk's office as far as requesting more ballots before the polls were closed?
I think I got thrown off. You mean when they were calling out, you said election?
Right. I mean, I can understand lines being busy, but are you aware if they went for a long period of time without being able to reach anybody in City Hall?
I've heard stories that some people did. As soon as we got a call, we would take it, and if they needed ballots, even I was delivering ballots at 7 o'clock on election night. But if your question is, should we have had additional lines, that's something that we'll look into for next year. I don't know. I know there was frustration that we heard from workers that they tried to call and couldn't reach people.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it customary to have runners in place ahead of election to deal with emergency situations?
Yes, we always have the troubleshooters. Is it one for every 10 precincts? Or 8?
We have 12 a year.
Okay, and were there runners in place this year?
Oh, and then we also have people in our office, yes.
No, I mean outside of your office staff.
Yes, right.
Okay, and so were there runners in place this year?
Yes,
What's the number that was in place this year?
12.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Grinstein, we have heard people say that they repeatedly called for runners, they repeatedly called for ballots. In some cases, it was hours. And we've been told that when they couldn't get the troubleshooters, they tried to get City Hall. And I've talked to at least 3 election workers who said it was about 40 minutes before they could get to anybody in City Hall. So I was specifically hoping to know, I see a sort of a sheet that said, here's the criteria, I'm trying to figure out why that lapse of time, basically. We want to elaborate further, or should we pursue it more later?
I think we should pursue it more later, get more details.
All right. The next question is, when did you realize you were running low on ballots? What instructions did you give then? And did you keep a log to show when you started getting these calls? Generally, who responded to emergency and where did they go?
Okay. The first thing we realized was the number of question envelopes that were running out. On average, we use about 8 question ballot envelopes per precinct. We always send out packets of 25. This year, the average was 50 per precinct. Some precincts had more than 100. I think there might have been one that had more than 200. So that started earlier in the day, and we would run, the troubleshooters would deliver those.
Can you give approximate time? You figured that out?
I don't.
5.
Well, the question ballot was earlier, wasn't it?
I would say 4:30 for question envelopes.
You didn't realize there was a problem until 4:30 with that? Okay. And then what about the ballot?
5. It was more like 5. I did receive an email at 1:40 from, that expressed concern that there was an email going around telling people they could sign up to vote and vote on Election Day, and that it didn't matter where they voted. That would trigger a question ballot if somebody wasn't registered. You have to register 30 days before the election, so it was March 4th. If people were rushing to the polls and they were not registered voters, they would have to vote a question envelope. If they're voting in a different precinct, they would have to vote a question envelope. So that was a trigger. I contacted the person who had sent the email, and he expressed concern. But we think that was part of what caused the question. When we found out that the ballots were running low, it was around 5 o'clock, it was rush hour, and so there was a delay in getting through traffic to get them. But we tried as hard as we could to get ballots out to every precinct that needed it.
Mr. Trainey?
Just a question, Barbara, who was that email from?
It's from Jim Minry.
Okay, thank you.
I still wanted to see some kind of a policy or procedures for how you deal with emergencies. I haven't gotten that one yet. Should we deal with that one later?
Yes. I mean, there's no written policy what you do in an emergency. It's just that you mobilize the forces and get stuff out to the precincts.
Well, then maybe some more detail about who those people were and how you mobilized them would be helpful.
Okay.
Mr. Birch.
The concern was noted regarding the mistaken advice on registering the same day that you voted. And I guess my question, to try to figure out the kind of the impact that may have had was looking to see how many people actually registered on the day that they voted. And it's my understanding that it was like 100 or 120, and I guess I just want to verify that number, because if it's that few, I would say that would be a fairly low impact. But do you have an indication as to how many people registered on the same day as the election?
Ms. Duke has that number.
Pardon me?
Ms. Duke has that number.
We received 139 voter registration forms. However, the election workers know very well that once you vote that question ballot envelope, it will register you when we send the floppies to the state. So if they had ran out of registration paperwork, they could have voted a question ballot, and that would thus register them.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out the materiality of the issue regarding the folks that were advised that they could register the same day, and it appeared to me that it was fairly minimal. Thank you.
I just forgot. Oh, Mr. Honeman.
Yes, and so on, part of that question is when did you know that the ballots were running low? So you didn't get calls until like 4:30 from any of the precincts? 'Cause I thought I read an email or two where they actually said that they started contacting shortages or low numbers at around 1 or 12:30 or 1 or 1:30. People that have been seasoned that recognized that the numbers were getting low and they needed more.
Troubleshooters had ballots, so they may have gotten ballots initially from their troubleshooters.
Okay.
And so you weren't notified when that happened, apparently?
Not that early.
Troubleshooters did not have on-reserve ballots. Troubleshooters did come in and said, precinct so-and-so is down to 50. So we would supply them with 100 more, but I would not call that an emergency situation. I think the question you're trying to get into is when did it hit the fan? And I'm going to say 5 o'clock.
Well, I guess that's not quite what I meant. I think you've got an indication if you've got troubleshooters running ballots to people at 1 and 2 o'clock that you're going to have a mounting problem later on. I guess that was my thinking.
Okay.
But seeing no one else, let's go to the next. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Starr. I apologize. I should write down when I see people's hands. Go ahead, Mr. Starr, and then Mr. Trombley.
Well, sort of drilling down on the chain of command here and how that all happened, I can bet what was happening in an earlier part of the day was you ran out of a certain supply and may not have been a ballot, so you sent them a question envelope, and so that was question envelope. So I get that part of it, but Barbara, I'm challenged by an answer to a question which you sent to me relatively early in my questioning process, which when I asked you, did some polling stations ever get ballots? And your answer back to me was, Josh drove ballots to the precincts that we knew we were low on. Extra ballots are locked in the room here. And then I further drilled down on the question, and your email response back to me is, Josh isn't here to question, but as far as I know, he took ballots out to the precincts that requested him. Now, did we in fact utilize 12 troubleshooters, or did we utilize Josh? I mean, I'm wanting to know the ability for you to respond to the issue, and I predicated it because you may have had your troubleshooters out there taking question envelopes and samples or whatever, but did we have more staff and capacity beyond just Josh to run out?
Right, you had asked about specific precincts.
Mine, in Kuyak Eagle River.
And Josh was the one who happened to be taking ballots.
I never got an answer. Did some of my precincts ever get ballots?
I believe they all did.
I didn't have a chance to look them up because I didn't get that answer in that, but is Josh here? And I guess back to the question of what did you use Josh for? Was he a troubleshooter or was he just a
Josh
runner?
works in our office.
I know him.
And we augmented the troubleshooting staff with people in our office as we do every election. And we can find out the exact precincts.
Mr. Wheeler, do you want to chime in on that?
Madam Chair, the first spreadsheet under tab 1, which is the big fold-out one that's in color, the ballot report, there's a column, and it looks, I think it's column, let's see, count, maybe 7 or 8, it's called Add Ballots. And if you find the various different precincts, you'll see where precincts had ballots added to what they started with. And actually, if you look at Peters Creek, for example, they actually sent 25 to another precinct, so they shared in some instances.
Well,
so
use that one, Mr. Wheeler, precinct 160, the second one on the first page.
Right.
Shortage, yes. 0. What does that mean? Shortage, yes, they didn't get any sent to them?
Okay, you're looking at a column further down to the right of the spreadsheet. What that means is they had a shortage at some point during the night, and then the number indicates what they finished with. So if you look at that one, they had a shortage somewhere during the night. They probably received ballots from the Peters Creek above them. That's why there's a negative
So somebody was running ballots between precincts as well as taking them.
Exactly. Peters Creek, 145, finished with zero unused ballots and had no shortage. Peters Creek Christian Center, 160, had a shortage but finished with no
All right, I get that, and I can study the spreadsheet. Just give me the answer. Did Josh ever take ballots from City Hall and run them out there?
Yeah.
You're saying yes, Jacqueline. Did he or did he not? I don't know.
Yes, he ran ballots from City
Then
Hall.
why would you transfer from Peters Creek to another precinct?
That would have happened in the interim between the troubleshooter. They don't necessarily have to talk to us to share ballots.
Okay, back to the troubleshooter. Who took the ballots from, in your case, they transferred 25 ballots from one precinct to another out in Chugaki Group?
That was most likely the troubleshooter.
Who told them to do it?
We probably instructed troubleshooters to...
Did you tell them to do it?
I did not tell that troubleshooter,
Who
no.
was talking to the troubleshooters then to tell them to do this?
Like we referred earlier, they can call the clerk's office, and we're all versed in how to handle situations.
Who was in the clerk's office telling these guys to take...
Telling people to take some... I can answer the question for you. When people were running out, every single person had a different situation. Some were running out of question envelopes. Some had question envelopes, didn't have ballots. So every single situation had a different answer. So I can't tell you exactly what happened at every single precinct, but I can tell you, based on what situation, what I would have said and what I did say. And if someone's out of ballots and has nothing, then yes, go next door and take some if they're there. Because the main thing we want is for people to be able to vote.
What happened was then when you took those 25 ballots, then you had voters show up at those precincts, then they ran out, and so you did
I think you're
this...
talking about a different situation, sending a voter to a neighboring precinct.
That was out, and then a
Correct.
neighboring precinct after that, it was a went
I
out.
think the main goal is to get the ballots to a precinct. If they have none, to give us time to get the ballots to the precinct we just shared from.
I asked the question on the 7th of April, did Josh take ballots to Eagle River? And
I did not get that email.
I did, and I'm sorry I didn't respond at the end. But he did,
Thank you.
and I will verify that too, Mr. Starr.
Or I can talk to Josh.
I think we should mark questions that we feel are not thoroughly answered so that they can be asked again and repeated until we get answers. Mr. Trombley.
This is a follow-up question to what Mr. Birch asked, and it would be to the Election Commission, is assuming Jacqueline's situation, that she stated that if someone comes in to register to vote, and they vote a question ballot, and then someone else comes in and says, I want to register to vote, and they've run out of the ability to register, and they're given just a question ballot, do you run that through your system to say, this person was not registered to vote, they did vote, yes, but obviously they would not be able to vote, but that ballot would be thrown out. But if a person, you're able to see that a person tried to register to vote and voted, that ballot would be excluded, correct?
Correct.
So anyone that attempted to register and vote on the same day as the election, those votes would not count and they would not be tallied into the final amount. So that would not affect the election results, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm watching the time, folks, and we need to hear from Mr. Wheeler, but let's try to go through and realize that we will have to ask more questions later. Next question is, were election workers told that all ballots delivered to them late were to be treated as question ballots?
Depending on what supplies the precincts had left, determine which emergency action they took. They would, if the precinct had question envelopes, they were instructed to treat the ballots as question due to the fact that the voter was voting a sample ballot. If they were out of the question envelopes, they were instructed to vote the ballot and put it in the emergency slot. I think if I had made the call, it would have just been to use as long as the person was on the register, the ballot was, if they voted a sample ballot, it was fine, and I would have preferred that they didn't vote a question envelope, they just would have put it in the slot, but I wasn't there when that started to happen. And so I think there were a variety of ways that the precinct chairs handle the situation. But if a voter comes up and their name is on the registration, the voter register for that precinct, they could sign the name the way they always do. That's the valid vote, and if it was a blue sample ballot, it should have been put in the emergency slot. But again, there was a little confusion.
So some precincts did treat them all as questioned, and some precincts did not? Is that correct?
I believe that's so.
Okay. The next question is, assuming ballots were available, is it true that some precincts did not get additional ballots at all, or did not get ballots until just before the polls closed?
All precincts except one are confirmed to have received either official tabulating ballots or ballots in some form that people could vote, samples or copies. The spreadsheet notes that notes which precincts finished with a surplus. The speed with which ballots were delivered and not delivered was based on traffic and distance away. I know the last precinct I visited was the Russian Church on Turpin. It was about 7:45 or 10 minutes to 8. There were about 20 people sitting patiently there waiting because their poll worker had said ballots are coming. And the rule is always if you're in line by 8 o'clock, you get to vote. And they were all prepared to they were in a little room, they were prepared to shut the door at 8 o'clock, but let everybody who was there vote the ballots.
Mr. Starr?
There's markings on some of the precincts back into Chugiak Eagle River where you have a shortage was recognized, but no ad ballots show up in the column. Eagle River Town Center, Joy Lutheran. So there's a shortage of ballots. Does that mean that somebody didn't get to vote? And there's a shortage of ballots recognized and no ballots were ever delivered in your add ballots column here.
Yeah.
So does that mean that somebody wasn't able to vote?
I'll defer to Mr. Wheeler. I did not prepare the chart, and I'm not familiar.
There may be a question for the precinct chair as well, but I guess the point is, if you recognize that they had somehow, and I'll leave the question, how did they tell you they were short ballots? We'll ask that offline, but if they didn't get ad ballots,
The most likely scenario is that precinct began using their sample ballots or Xeroxes. It's still certainly possible that somebody didn't get to vote if they decided not to wait. And of course, we have
Can I just stop you for a second? Jacqueline, I'm asking the clerk's office a question. You deferred the question to somebody else. While he's answering, you're nodding yes. I would like to know from the clerk's office, I'm not trying to be rude here, but I want to know what you knew when it comes to the answer that you provided. So I can surmise what Dennis is. I surmise the same thing. I wanted to know if you knew the answer. That's why it's important to me for you to do that. So if you knew the answer that, yeah, they use sample ballots or whatever, because you just nodded affirming, then tell me that, please. It's just, I want to know what happened from your perspective.
Okay. Chugiak Eagle River, to my surprise, started running out of ballots, and it was really unusual. They ran out of the question envelopes first, and then they ran out of ballots. We ran them. Josh ran to, I'd say, 75% of the precincts out there. Not all of them ran out. Like it says in the report, if it ends in a 0, that means they did not finish with a surplus. It will notate that, and we can only assume that they ended up voting sample or copies or the wrong card style with the same races on it. And we don't know until we open up those envelopes. We can't see what's in a question envelope right now. So I can't promise you that any one scenario happened.
Let me ask you this scenario. Did somebody get turned away because they had nothing to vote on?
I was not at any one of those precincts, so I can't tell you that. However, I know that any time someone accused us of that, like called me personally, I immediately called the polling place and dispelled that rumor.
In what way? That they had something to vote on, or you brought them ballots, or what?
Most of the emails, or not emails, that's too slow. Most of the phone calls I got were from the media accusing us of closing a polling place or that someone had shut the door, and I immediately called the chairperson.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate the respect and the time, Ms. Chairman, but I think this one's
important. I hear you. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Owen?
Yeah, thank you. I understand there were a significant number of ballots that people ran out of in South Anchorage, specifically at Handshoe, ballots that had the annexation issue on them. How were those taken care of? And there were a relatively small number.
I find that hard to believe. I would say that then they were being misallocated. When I say misallocated, that area that's being annexed only has, I would say, under 15 properties. So that running out is highly surprising. Which section are you talking about? The people who want to be included in the LRSA, or the people who do not want to be, or outside of the LRSA already?
I'm not aware of the details, Ms. Duke.
Okay, well, that property is the LRSA, and they want to annex in a section or do not. They got the chance to vote on it. The second ballot style, that is part of the section that wants to annex in. Very small, not maybe, I think 9 to 15 properties in that area. So running out of that ballot, I find highly unlikely.
We'll investigate that further, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you. And are you, Madam Chair, if I could, one
Go ahead, you have the floor.
Is the clerk's office aware that the mayor's Facebook page was posting ballot shortages at 6:42 and instructing people where to go?
I should say, actually, correctly, somebody told me that yesterday or 2 days ago.
And then
I was not aware at election night.
And then the mayor's Facebook posted again at 7:40 that folks should stay and wait for ballots.
I had no contact with the mayor or the mayor's staff.
I'll be happy to share the screenshots with your office.
Okay. Folks, we're not going to get through this, and we really need Mr. Wheeler. Do you want to go through the next 3 questions, or do you want to go to Mr. Wheeler?
I mean, I'm happy with the process of the questions, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I don't think we absolutely have to have the data. Great, and thank you for the...
Okay. All right, let's go through finish the questions. And on this delivery, can you tell me how many people you had running ballots?
We had the 12 troubleshooters plus about 7 in my office. Well, say 6 because there's always somebody in the office.
So about 18 people were running ballots?
Well, actually, I should verify because I wasn't there all the time.
There were 12 troubleshooters. There was 5 people from the office. There was 2 people from the mail board, as well as 4 additional non-staff.
You had all those people delivering ballots?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The next question is, let's see. Were election workers ever told, we do not have ballots? Were election workers ever told to send people away?
No.
To both questions?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last question I have is, did any polling place close before 8 p.m.?
None that we're aware of. As Jacqueline said, the media was calling with questions. We heard that this place closed, we heard that place closed, and we would call each polling place and verify. Several years ago, maybe my first election, I started to make sure that everybody had access to a cell phone. So all the poll workers were asked, all the precinct chairs were asked when they picked up their stuff if they needed a cell phone so that people could call. But so we would call the chairperson, and we had no indication that any was actually closed early.
Mr. Starr.
Have you looked at the chairman reports, Barbara, to see that they may have closed early?
I have not, but others have gone through those.
Jacqueline, have you looked to see if any closed early?
We took a preliminary look through them just to look for ballot shortage comments.
And so your initial answer to that is that they
I do not know of any that shut the doors, and it's notated.
Thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
Do you have any idea how many people were not able to vote?
No.
Do we don't have any kind of tally?
I think Mr. Wheeler has a better answer.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Trombley?
That's all. It's a big
Ms.
question.
Johnston?
Yes, and this goes from the rumor mill, so I just wanted to get an answer on this one. Somebody had mentioned when they went to service to vote there was a note on the door saying closed to medical emergency. Have you heard that?
Yes, that was first thing in the morning. The chair of the precinct, who had a medical emergency, we rallied at one of the other members of the team to go to her house and get the stuff, and so service opened late. But that happens periodically, that something happens to somebody, but...
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Traney and then Mr. Hodeman.
Jacqueline, on question 11, going back to that one, I was talking to Jim Posey. He said he and his wife went to vote, and he'd voted earlier, so his wife wanted to vote. She was turned away because they didn't have any ballots, so they were told to go to a different place to vote, and that one said they had no ballots. So she ended up just not voting. Have you heard that before relative to this election?
Yes. I mean, I've read the majority of all the emails that have come in, but they're people's accounts, and we tried to dispel anything we heard. We told poll workers these three things. One, if a person is not willing to wait for those ballots, they can go to UAA or they can go to the airport. They have all ballot styles, and we've confirmed they did not run out. The third possible thing they could do, and it's not the best thing, but it's something if somebody just absolutely cannot wait or go to those locations, was to visit a neighboring polling place, because the majority of card styles out there was card 4. That is the card we couldn't get out there fast enough.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Hodeman?
Just briefly, and I know the question was anybody told to go elsewhere or was sent away? But there's actually, I don't know which channel, but there was actually a media channel listening to a poll worker tell a person, we have no materials for you, you need to find another precinct or whatever. So I guess the question was specifically to you. Did you ever tell anybody? I'm sure that answer was no. But just wanted to note that I can't remember which one it is, but it's been replayed. Thank you.
All right. That concludes the list of questions that were submitted earlier to the clerk's office. Ms. Johnston?
Are we allowed to ask one or two extra questions?
Sure, and then we're going to go to Mr. Wheeler.
One of the emails we received as Assembly members were from a volunteer that worked the whole day, and it raised a flag for me. What do we do as far as volunteers in the polling place? I couldn't find anything in the election manuals, so I was wondering.
I remember one of those emails, and I think this is probably the case. There were workers when we switched to using a vendor to do the payroll, to do ESS, instead of having the workers be actual municipal employees, there were a couple people who objected, and I know at least one, and I think there were more, who said, I will volunteer my time because I love doing elections, but I will not submit my information to this other company.
So as volunteers, did they do the same oath of office, and they went through all the process? It just, they did not get paid?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Grunstein at this time? All right, Mr. Wheeler has been asked a number of questions, and I think there's ongoing research. He also prepared this document based on the questions that I funneled to him from what I heard of your concerns. Mr. Starr, you want to go ahead?
Is he going to do a presentation, or can we just ask him questions right out of the gate?
Well, I thought he would just walk you through the notebook, and then you could ask questions. Is that all right?
I know it's in it, but...
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, are you hearing that? What would you like to say?
I just have a couple of preliminary comments first.
All right.
One, I tried to mark the spreadsheets draft. Some of these came off the printer, we had them delivered here to put them in the notebooks. And so there will be some minor edits, and of course they don't include all the data from what hasn't been run through the scanners yet, so keep that in mind. Number two, one of the spreadsheets you have behind tab 2 deals with the emails that the clerk's office has received, and that's where we can start building an idea of how many people say they actually did not vote or were not unable to vote. Two things to note about that. One, some of the information in there might need to be redacted. There's going to be email addresses and phone numbers, so I would particularly ask you not to send that out until we can prepare a redacted version that we can put out on the web for everybody to look at. And then our opinion, again, hot off the presses, I didn't get a chance to give it a final review and sign off, and I'll do that hopefully by the end of the day, or you'll have it Monday. I'll send it all to you. So it's a Word document in draft form behind tab 5, I think it is. So, but with that, I'll, if you want, I can walk through the first spreadsheet, which is the most interesting, or simply let it go to questions.
Mr. Starr, you have the floor.
Well, it is very self-explanatory, except with the word ordered on your third column or fourth column over. Ordered actually means delivered to the precinct, don't you think?
Looking at the first spreadsheet, the column is titled Order. Yes, that one is actually both ordered and delivered, and you'll want to compare that to the order spreadsheet, which is
yeah, I looked at
further
that.
back.
And the reason I've looked at it is because you've been sending us thank you all week, Dennis, and I have had a chance to look at some of what you sent, so I'm not trying to cut you off short, but some of it's not new. I appreciated that, but the clarification is it wasn't ordered from the vendor that printed the ballots, it was ordered by the precinct and delivered, so that's...
It's the order that the clerk's office placed to the printer by precinct and card style, and then also includes what she then delivered to the precincts of that same kind. So it tallies them both together in that order column, and that's why you need to look at the...
No, that wouldn't be correct. I mean, she's 70% column is what she ordered from the printer.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, and so the order is what we sent to the precinct to begin with.
I don't think so.
Yes.
Wait a minute, there's confusion on that. Let's, Mr. Wheeler...
Well, no, I'm sorry. Let me explain. And
Use the first one as 145. Everyone can look at the first
The
page.
reason for the difference there in terms of orders, because the 70% is largely made up through the absentee ballots in the gray. So let's just take Peters Creek for an example. Okay? The 70% requirement for those 4 precincts totals 5930. She makes that order through 700 for Peters Creek, 145, 800 for 160, and so on, and then also all the absentee ballots. So for a total order and delivered of 8050. That's my understanding, and Jacqueline can speak to that in greater detail if you need.
Well, back to that criterion of, and so my question for you is that in the requirement of the charter language to print 70% of registered voters, does the other language in the other section, we've got .010 says 70% of registered voters shall be ordered and printed. Then you have 020, which says you'll just deliver the ballots to the precinct in adequate time in a separate box. Is there a reason that we could interpret that the 70% of ballots printed is what was intended by the charter or the code language to go to the precinct?
It's not that clearly or expressly stated. That's certainly one way to look at it, but it's my understanding the clerk's office has not operated that way. And so their interpretation of how that works is equally valid.
Is equally valid just from past precedents, you think?
Because the language itself is not clearly express enough to mandate that all 70% go to the precinct. In fact, it would defeat the purpose or the function of doing the early voting and absentee and mail unless they ordered beyond the 70%.
I concur with you. I'm looking for 2 things here. Is the culpability, looking for the ability to certify the election, and then the third thing is what do we do about it in the future? So this may be one area where, rather than just rely on historical trends, we say you shall deliver X amount. So that's all. I'm not to debate you on it, but that's actually all I have from you because you've been pretty forthcoming all week with the data. So thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wheeler, does it, anywhere in these spreadsheets, does it tell us how many ballots were initially delivered to each precinct? Specific to the precinct? I'm trying to find that.
In an email that I sent you earlier, we scanned 170-some pages of the orange sheets that had the deliveries, and I think some of you brought them here tonight. She's showing you examples there. And we have tallies in here, but the sheets themselves are...
Okay, but that's not tabulated it's not condensed into a spreadsheet of some sort, it's just the actual delivery sheets, that's the only data we have.
Well, no, it's in this order deliver column that I'm talking about.
That doesn't make sense. If you're talking about the third column, you have the registered voters, the 70%, and the order, that doesn't make any sense, because if that were the case, 700 ballots would have been delivered to precinct 145, 415 were voted, or sorry, let me do 160, 800 were ordered, 551 were voted, and yet somehow they still ran out. That can't be the right order.
Ms. Duke is telling me that I should let her answer.
What's that?
Ms. Duke is saying that I should let her answer.
Okay.
You're pointing out something that's exactly correct. That's why it's important to look at this is more of a working spreadsheet that we use. When you look at the order, at the very beginning of the election, the order column will match exactly to what the vendor sends us. After that, we can move ballots around, and then it's used to reflect what happened at the election, so it's more organic. The next year, you can look back and say, oh, I added 150 here and moved 500 over here because mail didn't send that many out, so it becomes a living, breathing document. So yes, you are noticing something that's correct. That's not going to match the order. That's why we printed these out. They're reallocated differently, and that's what you're seeing.
Okay. At some point, and I know you're very busy right now, it would be helpful to me if you could collate the data on a delivery sheet so we can look at it in a more condensed format.
That's what I expected, too. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Frankly, I applaud Mr. Starr, because I was confused by this. This isn't crystal clear for me.
Well, one thing is there's no undertone. I didn't mean to interrupt, but there's no undertone that there was anything. You can look at those delivery sheets. They're quite impressive in terms of that serialized data, all the other stuff. So the data exists. It's just not in the purest form. So I'm impressed by the data control of the delivery of the signatures by the chair. They were all delivered, the 31st or whatever, which brings other comments, but I won't do them now. So, but it exists, and it's very well done. It's just, as you point out, challenging.
Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a pretty complex document to be looking at for the first time, and I understand that it's draft, but I'm confused by the fact that the 70% column represents the total ballots that were printed, ordered and printed, and delivered to the city of Anchorage. Is that correct?
70% is the minimum we're allowed to order. I believe we ordered more than that.
It's just a calculation based on the registered voters.
Based on code, you ordered 70%, at least 70%.
Correct.
In other words.
So the 70% number is just what the target is. Above, you have to go above it. So the order is the order.
All right, and in most cases on this spreadsheet, the 70% is the larger number than the order number, except in the first section, in the Peters Creek, Chugiak, and Fire Lake precincts. There's about more than 2,000 more ballots ordered and delivered to the precincts than the 70%. I'm confused. Why is it that way? There's another one that has a similar situation. Let me find that. In almost every case, the 70% is less than the number ordered and delivered, except for the first four on page 1 of the draft ballot report. 145, 160, 165, and 240. But the total includes all the absentee locations ordered and delivered. So you didn't print a minimum of 70%. You printed significantly more, maybe close to 100%. I haven't got time to do the math right now.
Madam Chair, at the very end of the spreadsheet, the very bottom, you'll see a row called required to order, over and under. The formula suggests, if we've got all the right inputs, that the 70% would have been 138,961, And the amount ordered, in 2 columns over, just one row up, 144,850. We need to make an adjustment there because the clerk's office ordered an extra 500 ballots at one point, and we may have allocated that twice, which is why it's different than the 143 in the order sheets from the printer. But looking at the order sheets, we ordered 143 and something, but the 70% came out to 138,960, so the clerk's office did order more than the 70%.
So the column marked registered voters per precinct, 3512, is actually 70% of the registered voters, not 100%. Mr. Wheeler?
No, that's incorrect. The 70% column is the 70%. That registered voter per precinct is the 100% registered voters, and that's pulled directly from the state lists.
Well, there's nothing in the 70% column on my page.
It's really hard to understand this sheet. It's very complex because you have precincts that are considered splits. 985, it had 8 or 9 ballot styles. It's hard to show a ballot order for a split precinct. You'd have to get really granular and look at actually how many residents and estimate how many voters per residence to figure out how many registered voters are in that area. So if you notice, if you go to 985, it's going to say 985-1, 985-2. That represents each area that gets a different ballot. We put the number for the registered voters under 950, 985, whatever precinct, -1. So you're going to have some numbers that are skewed because there's no way we can break that down for you. That's why it's not the simplest thing to do a ballot order.
Thank you. I'll hold for now.
Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jacqueline, I got a question for you. Couple questions. Precinct 160 and 165, Peters Creek Christian Center. I can see they checked out that they got 3 packets, but then they have an NA and it says 50. Was that some additional ballots that were taken to them?
Which document are you referring to?
I'm looking at the precinct receiving list.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
The NA stands for the fact that it's not in a package number. I gave them an additional 50 ballots upon when they came and picked up their ballots.
Okay, so we don't put the range, because you've got the range.
No, all packets are arranged in 25s, so I gave them 2 packages of 25, and I do not have the sequence numbers written down.
Okay, and the same thing happened for precinct 165?
Correct, I got an additional 125 at supply pickup.
On precinct 200, Skyline Family Fellowship, I see they didn't check the side this is checked. They checked off the side. Does it really matter where they check it at?
No.
Jacqueline? Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Starr.
I spent quite a bit of time, and I just, I see there's more than 143,000 ballots ordered, so, because you registered voters is going to sometimes get the absentee in the mail, and so we can't focus in on the 143. You need to go to the delivery sheet and look at it, because you'll pick up the folded ballots for the absentee mail-outs, and so there's another 20,000 ballots, and then another order of 500, so really zero in in your packet 03, I spent half a day doing just that, and it does look, it's just a matter of that, but back to another request, if you can give us the original delivery, if you can go back through those sheets on delivery and tell us how many that they started the day with, let us go back and then add in the number of ballots that you took them, if you can give us that column, which is apparently on this spreadsheet, and then, lo and behold, when we see the count by precinct, we'll have a better idea on how to decide what actually transpired, in my opinion. So if you can keep going on our additional request, and that's not today, but another day, a breakdown of those.
I believe I tried doing that on the accountability report.
Yeah, I see that. But
Received is supposed to match these receiving lists.
Let's just be clear so that...
I'll double check.
Also, then just give us the columns where they got 25 added in. Not particularly too curious about where they came from, because you're doing plus minuses on the spreadsheet, but I think that...
Well, if I could just say, the draft accountability, which is under tab 1, there's 8 pages.
Yep.
Under received, that is supposed to match these orange sheets. And if we added ballots or took away ballots, that was during election day.
It's still vital to me, though, on how that transpired.
That's how I designed this, though.
And then as well, when we get the precinct canvases all done and all the mail-outs, we can see how that plays out. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wheeler, I know we also ask you for legal precedent and clarification of both state code and city code to help us as we make decisions over the next week or two. Do you have any comments about what's provided in the notebook in that regard?
Can I ask a more pointed question first?
Sure, go ahead.
I didn't mean to maximize the meeting here, but the grounds for election contest are part of the question that Ms. Osiander just did in terms of not only the precedent, but determining that we even need to apply that precedent. And you're not asked to investigate this by any means, but the definition of the malconduct fraud, these are grounds for an election contest. I'm particularly interested in the final sentence. It's in all of those, which is it's the actions that were sufficient to change the result of the election. And then again, it says that any corrupt practice as defined by law sufficient to change the result of the election. So in your observations here, in my interpretation of this, and correct me as my question, if you could actually say that somebody fraudulently tried to vote a different way, or you can say that a polling person, hid ballots, potentially you could have election fraud, but if it affected, say, 100 votes, that's the measure here. Isn't so much that the fraud existed, it's the measure of will it sway the outcome. Is that right?
In a nutshell, yes. When you're talking about a voter-instigated fraud, the most likely remedy is to deduct those votes if you can determine where they are.
Yeah. But the proof in the election contest has to be of significant accusation that it could affect the outcome. Meaning, in this case, I don't know yet. I'm not trying to put the commission on task here, but, it's the separation between the mayoral candidates, is the separation between the prop questions. So if there's 10,000 votes separating that question, then we have to say that 10,000 votes here are of question, suspect, or other. Is that right? Because otherwise we wouldn't sway the outcome.
Essentially, if either you have a concrete number and there's no way that number can make up a difference to change the outcome, or the number is uncertain, but you look at the malconduct and you try to do your best to estimate what that number would be, again, is it enough to change the election? If the answer is no, then that's generally the end of the inquiry.
Let me ask a more pointed question. So if a poll closed early and the accusation is, hey, I didn't get to vote because my poll closed at 7:30, and there's only 2,000 registered voters in the precinct, even if every one of them came down there between 7:30 and 8, the premise, it's wrong that somebody didn't get to vote because their station closed, but 2,000 votes, if they all showed up in that next half an hour, they still wouldn't change the election. Is that a fair estimation?
That's correct, and that's certainly one scenario. Another scenario is that they would take those votes and apply them proportionately to the candidates or the issue. So either of those two scenarios could come into play, and if you take the worst case one in terms of a complete swing, all the voters, and it doesn't change the outcome, you could end the inquiry there.
Final question on malconduct. Is malconduct intentional, in your opinion, or does it border in, the definition is mal being bad and conduct being what it is? So, if you say, is it bad conduct, is it intentional bad conduct, or just incompetence, or that? Do we have, what definition are we going to put here for the ability to contest based on malconduct?
It can include either, actually. If you look at page 5 of my draft opinion, it's defined as a significant deviation from the statutorily or constitutionally prescribed norms. And then you'll get into discussion, and the court will say, if it needs to, it will, if there's a significant deviation, it only creates that malconduct if you have the scienter, either a knowing non-compliance with the law or a reckless indifference to those norms.
Okay, so you're saying if it was intentional, that's it, or you just, I don't care, that's also correct. I got it. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Trainee?
Dennis, on the question of sample ballots. We created over 10,000 sample ballots. Are those a legal document for the people to vote on that meets the requirements of Section E and 28.40.010?
Yes. Certainly at the state level, they actually have a statutory provision regarding...
Should we have one to ours to covers this case for the next time?
Yes, it would be helpful.
If you'd give me something in writing, I'd appreciate it. I'm just a little concerned about the issue of sample ballots that may be floating around out there. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
Mr. Wheeler, I've had a chance to read the case of Hammond versus Hickle, and it seems to me that there's going to be we have to rely somewhat on what the court stated in that, their final ruling in that, and their definitions of malconduct and whatnot. As this body moves forward, and we look in the statute and we say, or we look in our code and there's rules for a re-election or however we move forward, does this body have to rely on what the courts have set a standard at which meets malconduct or any of their terms to warrant a new election? Or can this body say, we don't care what they say, we're going to do what we want to do? Are we bound by what the courts have said, set that standard in Hammond versus Hickle?
We've addressed that in the draft opinion, and I would say unless, one, the Assembly enacts some code to the contrary, and two, we determine that code can be different than state law or the state and federal constitutional decisions regarding those laws, then you could deviate. But at the moment, you need to comply with the limitations in those court cases.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Chair.
Drummond.
Thank you. It's not in your selection of code citations regarding elections, Mr. Wheeler, but our code at 28.50.120, providing ballot to voter, says when a voter has qualified to vote, the election official shall give the voter an official ballot. The voter shall retire to a booth or private place to mark the ballot. Can you please define an official ballot?
There may be a definition in code. I'll need a minute to look it up.
Don't you think that's important for the Assembly to consider?
It certainly is, but I also note that the decisions recognize that in a shortage situation, it's okay to use sample ballots.
I think as a general rule, the courts are pretty liberal with allowing other materials because they precisely do not want to disenfranchise voters, is what, to paraphrase what Mr. Wheeler is saying.
Okay, just a second. Ms. Drummond has the floor, and then there's a couple of people who wanted to talk. Ms. Drummond?
I'm fine for now, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Trombley, and then we'll go to Mr. Flynn. That was you, Mr. Starr? I don't know, I couldn't tell.
No, it's fine. I was going to say something, but go ahead, Mr. Starr. I can go after.
I just want to reiterate that I'm not going down this path, especially for 500 or 600 election workers. I'm not trying to make a statement that they did wrong by the measure of malconduct, and that's not where I'm headed with that discussion. I'm looking at it from what the next task is to be able to certify the election, and I think that's really clear because I don't know what your word was when preferably the stuff hit the fan or whatever you said at 5 o'clock. I think our poll workers did a tremendous job adapting, whether they used a sample ballot or changed over, and I see that too. The Election Commission said it boldly, was they did an outstanding job thinking on their feet. And if that may be meant, I got to close that door because I can't answer those hostile people out there. I give them the benefit of the doubt for a minute to get their thoughts together, honestly. And I've looked at it, looked at the records. Now you've reaffirmed. I think they did a great job under duress, and whether they got good direction, clear direction, or no direction, I think it really was a noble effort. So I'm preaching, but I also want it clear that I'm not saying that any of that level was a malcontent active or an intentional act. I think they did a great job of thinking on their feet, as I can see our own clerk's office did at times too. So thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Nothing.
Did you want to elaborate? You're done?
Nope.
Okay, any additional comments? Okay. Okay. Mr. Hall, you had some concluding remarks?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Oh, just a minute. Mr. Wheeler, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I got two things out to you and the public. One,
All right.
I want to try to get all of this up on the web as soon as possible.
That will be really helpful, really helpful.
Keep in mind-
Thank you. Yeah, we can't hear you.
I'll try to get all this material up on the web so that people can see it. Some of it I'll have to, as I mentioned earlier, deal with confidentiality issues, but we'll get it out there. Number two, I provided you a spreadsheet that addresses the emails the clerk's office has received in regards to people who were not able to vote. That tally right now looks like 17 clear did not votes. That's all, 17. Now, there's people there that say, well, a friend of mine, or I heard this, or heard that, but it's really important that if people did not vote because of a shortage of ballots, that they provide their personal story. We really can't rely on, well, I heard of a friend who didn't. Of the 17, some of those folks could not wait at the polls because they had other commitments. They may be viewed in a different category than those people who actually did not get a ballot at all. So I would encourage anybody who has not already contacted the clerk's office to do so, because at some point we've got to decide that we've provided enough opportunity and we need to close that door so that you can make a decision based on those numbers.
Echo that. We need data. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. First I want to echo what Ms. Osiander said in the beginning. This is merely a first step in this process. We particularly want to emphasize the fact that any of you have personal instances of this, please contact the hotline and give us that information so that we can get it. The Election Commission, you guys are just amazing. I appreciate the calm in the storm. I think we pretty well learned from you that we're hopeful that by the end of next week we may have a finished count. We also heard from you that if you don't, please give it the patience and time that it takes to do it right. And I am here to assure you that we're going to do that without question. From the municipal clerk's office today, I think we've realized that maybe we've sort of touched the tip of the iceberg. We've got a lot more questions that are going to need to be answered. But, Ms. Grinstein, we appreciate the candid answers. We look to you for continued participation as we seek, hopefully, the good answers, closures, solutions, and things that are going to need to be put into place to absolutely make sure that we never, ever go through this experience again. From our municipal attorney, Mr. Wheeler, has provided us a great deal of information that's going to be of a real benefit to us. I'm sure that all 11 of us may have follow-up questions, and I've been very, very pleased how available you have made yourself to each and every one of us. We realize that you do have other matters that you have to address and deal with, but you've been very, very generous with your time in interfacing with us. Given the information today, we're in a better position to evaluate looking into a third-party counsel, if that's going to be needed, the potential focus, scope, and usefulness that inquiry could provide for us. And I want to close by saying I know that I speak for everyone on the Assembly in acknowledging the heart-wrenching battles faced by our election workers as they fought to secure ballots for our voters. And we can't ever tell you how much we appreciate that. You needed better support, and we failed you. And we have a great deal of rebuilding to do and intend to do it. Thank you.
With that, we're adjourned.